Welcome back, 6th graders. Miss Hall here with you again for another ARC lesson. I'm so excited to have you join us today. Let's jump into what we're going to learn today. We're going to focus our attention on connotation and denotation. First things first, I want us to be able to distinguish between the two. Our I can statement for today is, I can distinguish among connotations, which are associations of words with similar denotations or definitions. We will talk about and define these two later on. For today's lesson, you will need a few things, so let's take a look. You will need a notebook. I highly suggest that you have one each day for your lessons. We will be taking notes today, so make sure you have that handy with you today. Also, a hard copy or electronic version of today's article is fine, but we will be annotating online with the presentation, so if you don't have access to the article, that's okay. And also a pen, just so you can write down your notes, and if you're fancy like me, add that little highlighter so you can bump up your annotations for today. Ready to jump in? Let's get started. So, I have a few words here, and I just need you to take a moment. If you need to pause the video, that's fine, and define these words. We have home, house, residence, and dwelling. Pause this video now to define these words. Did you take a moment to write these definitions down? Great. Let's talk a little bit more. So the words home, house, residence, and dwelling have the same basic definition, but the meaning of each word is very different. Let's look back at your definitions. What do these words mean? You have house, resident, and dwelling. They're all places where a person will live. But again, depending on the setting or what we're talking about, they have different levels. So when we're talking about denotation, we're talking about the dictionary definition of a word. So a key thing for me that helped me to remember this, D for dictionary. Connotations, however, talks about the feeling or the emotions around the word. So for like the word home, cozy, loving, comfortable, have different meanings that express the word home. House is the actual building, somewhat technical if you want to get to the point. Residence, cold, feeling, not really, happy place. And then dwelling, very basic, primitive surroundings. Again, all these words mean the same thing, but they have different feelings or associations. Now remember, denotation is the dictionary definition of a word. And just remember what helped me, D equals dictionary. Connotation is word association. It's the emotional, cultural, and just the association around the word. So you may have to read around the text to get a feeling of what this word means. Keep in mind, house may mean something different compared to home or resident or dwelling. One thing I want you to keep in mind when we're talking about connotation, connotation can have a positive or negative emotion associated with that word. And we're going to dig more into that as we go through our presentation today. Something to remember for connotation, connection, or your colorful words. Now that we've talked about the definition of connotation and denotation, let's practice with some examples. Let's look at our first scenario here. If something doesn't cost a lot, we can call it either cheap or inexpensive. Both words mean generally the same thing, but they have a different connotation based on the context of what you're reading. So the denotation or the dictionary definition of both these words are what? Something that doesn't cost a lot. So they both mean around the same thing. Based on what we have here, which has a positive connotation or which has a negative connotation? Allow me to put this in context for you. I got some cheap tickets to the game, but the seats were in the nosebleeds, high in the rafters. Or if I want to use the inexpensive, I can say, I got a great deal on these tickets. They were very inexpensive. and deceits were pretty good. Cheap will be considered the word with the negative connotation, while inexpensive has the positive connotation. Cheap, inexpensive, they mean the same thing, but I use them in two different contexts. How do you feel so far? Let's do another example together. When we put something into something else, we call it either investing or gambling. Pause for a moment and think about the definition of these two words. Now, based on what I have here, investing and gambling both mean putting something into something else. Which has a negative connotation? Which word has a positive connotation? Give you a moment to think about that. Investing tends to have a more positive connotation than the word gambling. When we associate the word gambling with sometimes stuff that you may not want to do, even illegal, or things you do out of recreation, while investing is something you do for business or to bring in more income. Again, both words have the same general denotation, but the connotation or context will be a little bit different. You want to try another example? When something has never been there before, we call it either new or unproven. Pause for a moment, think about the denotation of both these words. So we have here that both these words generally mean never been before. New, you've never done it. Unproven, hasn't been searched or done before as well. Based off our denotation, let's talk about connotation. Which of these two words has a positive connotation? Which has a negative connotation? Now, this can be very tricky depending on how you're using it in the context of what you're reading. Technically, both words can have a positive or a negative connotation. Wasn't trying to throw you off, but I wanted you to understand how word choice does matter as you're reading a selection. Let's try another example. When someone's very careful with their money, we call them either stingy or thrifty. Give you a moment, think about the denotation of both these words. Again, both these words means really careful with their money, but which has a positive connotation and which has a negative connotation? Miss Hall is very stingy with her candy. She doesn't want to share with anyone. Does that have a positive or a negative connotation? Exactly, it's negative. What about thrifty? Miss Hall saved a few dollars using coupons at the grocery store. She's thrifty. Positive connotation. They both mean the same thing when we're talking about denotation, but in context, they have a different connotation or association. How we feel so far? Great. Let's do another example together. If someone is buying a car and they can choose a used or pre-owned vehicle, which has a positive connotation? Think about our words, used or pre-owned. Now, both these words have the same denotation, meaning that it's been used before or someone else had it or owned it. But which has a positive connotation? If you chose pre-owned, you're right on target. So we're going to practice some more. However, I'm going to provide you a headline and I want you to choose which one best works with it. Now keep in mind, we're focusing on connotation at this point, and I want you to be able to determine whether a word has a positive or a negative connotation associated with that word. Okay, let's take a look. Which headline would you likely find in a news article? Would it be A, the Carolina Panthers beat the New Orleans Saints 42-10? Or B, the Carolina Panthers dominated their rivals 42-10? Again, which has a positive connotation? A or B? If you chose A, you're on it. Now keep in mind, I'm a huge Carolina Panthers fan, so using the word dominated works for me, but it's not a positive word to spin on it. Want to try another one? Great. Now for this one, we're looking for the option that has a negative connotation. Which headline does not favor the development project? Would it be A, mall to destroy 300 homes, or B, mall to bring 3,000 jobs? Again, we're looking for the line that has the negative connotation. Did you choose A? Great job. Again, what word here signal that it had a negative connotation here? Exactly, destroy. We destroyed 300 homes. How do we feel so far? You got this, let's keep going. Let's practice our skills using a text. We're going to read a nonfiction or informational text today to practice our skills, focusing on connotation and denotation. Now keep in mind, you don't have to read the entire article to practice these skills, but it would be great if you did practice reading the entire article for yourself because there's some great information in there. As you're reading the article, I want you to think about our guided question. Keep in mind, I always want to make sure that we're practicing our comprehension skills, reading and making sure we understand what we're reading. So you may want to practice using some annotations as you're reading through the text, adding some notes, highlighting, anything that will help you understand what's happening as you're reading from the beginning to the end of our article. Here's our question. One conclusion a reader could make is that continental features are of varied ages. What does this question or statement mean? It's telling us that various continents started at different time frames, and I want you to find evidence to support that claim. Here's your time to pause the video, read the article for yourself. In this article, there was multiple headings. For this exercise, I want you to go find the heading Australia and Oceania. And I'm going to read this paragraph for you. Oceania is dominated by Australia. There are two other major landmasses of Oceania. One is the microcontinent of Zealandia, which includes the country of New Zealand. Much of Zealandia is formed by rocks that are underwater, with only New Zealand poking through the ocean's surface. Now, I want you to respond to this statement here. The author uses the word dominated to mean what? Pause this video and write your denotation of the word dominated. I'm going to highlight the word dominated so that we are able to reference it in our text here. Oceania is dominated by Australia. There are two other major landmasses of Oceania. Now keep in mind, we can also use some of our context clue skills that we have in our back pocket as well to help us to come up with the denotation of the word dominated. So what does dominated mean? Now using the text here to help me get a general definition of the word dominated, I'm going to say that dominated means to take over. Do you see any other clues that will help you come up with this definition? I see some. It provides us with examples, including the microcontinent of Zealandia, and it tells you it includes another country, which is New Zealand, and it talks about how it's formed by rocks underwater. Let's try some more. I want you to think about this question. What does the phrase living laboratory suggest as is used in the paragraph here? I'm going to highlight living laboratory just so we can find some clues that will help us come up with our best answer. Now that I have living laboratory highlighted, let's read together and find some clues as we're reading along. Biologists who study animals consider Australia and Oceania a living laboratory. When a continent broke away from Antarctica more than 60 million years ago, it carried a cargo of animals with it. These animals developed into creatures found only in Australia, such as the koala and the platypus and the Tasmanian devil. What is this question really asking us to figure out? Help me find some clues that'll help us address this question. So at the very beginning, it mentions how biologists studied animals in this area. And I also see how it mentions how they study animals from even 60 million years ago as it was carried as cargo when the continent divided. Also, see the word animals again, and then some examples of animals, including the platypus, the koala, and Tasmanian devil. Now, I wanted you all to notice that I highlighted the same word multiple times. That word was animals. So that should have been a big clue for us to help us figure out what's going on in this section of this text. So reading from here, it tells us, as we're answering, what does the phrase living laboratory suggest that animals provided us clues as to what happened in the past. So, in conclusion, a living laboratory in this context is talking about how animals provide us clues as to what happened in the past, even up to 60 million years ago. How do we feel? Now, I hope you were able to practice more on using connotation and understanding the difference between connotation and denotation, which is the diction definition. What did connotation mean again? Connotation is word association. Remember, C for colorful connections. And for denotation, we're talking about dictionary definition, D for dictionary. Now, before we end the day, I want us to make sure that we're practicing using some of the skills as we're reading our independent reading selections. So, here's my challenge for you today. As you're reading your book of your choice, try to practice finding words that have positive or negative connotations. Again, keep in mind, depending on what you're reading, you may find words that have negative connotations, or you may find words that have positive connotations. And that's okay. Jot them down, share it with your teacher, share it with your media specialist, or if you want to, send me a message as well. If you're not sure what to read at this moment, that's fine. Take this as an opportunity to read the article in its entirety. There are plenty of words there where you can identify words with negative or positive connotations within the context. Keep in mind, add up to your notes so you can share with your teacher. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I look forward to seeing you next time. Keep reading.